Now pay attention, 007. The iconic gun barrel sequence is at the start of every Bond film, pretty much. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if I can recreate my own. I'm going to hire out a film studio. I'm going to get into editing. I'm going to get into animation. I'm going to recreate things in 3D. We're going to get the music done, and we're going to see how easy it is to recreate that iconic gun barrel sequence. Stay tuned. The James Bond gun barrel sequence opens as pretty much every Bond film, and if it doesn't open the film, it's in there somewhere. And it's just absolutely iconic. I think you could show anybody in the world the James Bond icon of him in the gun barrel, and just hearing that music open it, and they would know instantly that they're in for a Bond adventure. And it's just something that I really like. I think, you know, it's just stood the test of time. It was developed for Dr. No. It's still a fantastic icon, and I just wondered if I was going to recreate it myself, just for a laugh / midlife crisis. I thought this would be a really cool thing to document as part of the YouTube channel. I'm going to break it down into the different elements that I found. The first element is the shooting, so actually going out and hiring a film studio and shooting the actual footage of Bond on the white background, the infinity curve. The next aspect is to put it all together in the edit with the animation and the kind of the elements of the gun barrel. And finally, it's getting the music right, getting that Bond theme on there, and just bringing it all together and seeing what happened. So the first step was to go and do the shoot itself. So let's just cut to me outside the studio. So the first thing we need to do is film me walking across a screen, and we've come to the studio barn just outside of Chippenham, where they have a lovely white infinity cove, and we're going to go in and we're going to do the filming bit. So let's go and check it out. So I work in filmmaking and videography, and I've got quite a few different connections around the local area, which is in Bristol, where I live. And I reached out and just said, hey, does anybody have a studio with a kind of a white infinity curve? I want to film somebody walking from left to right. I just found this really cool place. This guy called James from the Studio Barn in Chippenham. He reached out and said, hey, look, we've got the space. You can have it for this set price. You can pay by the hour. Just come along, see what you think. And I looked on their website, it looked absolutely fantastic. So I gathered together a small crew. It was myself and my wife, Michelle. I also had Ross Wilson, who's a director of photography who I've worked with a lot. Tim Shapcott was there also, who does a lot of photography and videography as well. I've interviewed him about Bond in a previous video, you might remember. And I also had Philippe Franken, who is a drone operator and just a really good friend, a close collaborator of mine on various video projects. We turned up on the day, and at the studio we met James, who was keen and eager to see what it was that we were up to. He was really excited about showing us the space. It's a really cool studio. It's absolutely massive. And to be fair, even though it's in Chippenham, which is away from Bristol, it was actually quicker for me to get to that than it was to drive into the centre of Bristol from where I live. So it's actually a really, really convenient location for a studio. The first thing to do was to get the shot. So just map out exactly how many steps it was going to be. So we worked out it was going to be 7 steps. I always had to start off on my right foot, I think, that ensured that when I got to the central turning point that I was in the correct position. There's a lot of thinking that goes into this that I wasn't expecting, that we did find out on the day. So we're currently setting up the cameras and the lights. We have this big infinity cove, which we're going to do the walk on. So if you have a look, it looks really, really nice. What we're going to do is we're going to put on the lens on the camera. We're going to frame it all up, make sure it's all lit right, and then I'll get changed, and then we can go and we can shoot the gun barrel walk on. We used anamorphic lenses, so a 50mm anamorphic lens, which gives you the kind of the CinemaScope 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio, which is my kind of favorite in the gun barrel sequences. The next thing I had to do once we'd set the picture and we'd set the frame and we knew exactly where we were going to be, was just getting the timing right. So just how quick it is to walk, how I actually get through the manner of walking. And then once we'd figured all that stuff out, it was just a case of getting into the suit. So all the Bonds, they always wear kind of grey or black suits and tuxedos and dinner jackets. I thought I really like the suit that Pierce Brosnan wears in Tomorrow Never Dies and The World's Not Enough. He's got a bit of blue in it, so I thought blue and a red tie is going to bring something different, make my Bond gun barrel a bit more unique. And there's also a lot of things that you need to consider. When Bond walks on, Sean Connery has a bit of a slow thing, and you know, George Lazenby and Dalton, they do a little bit of a jump when they spin round, and Dalton's a very serious walk and he does this kind of thing. So I'm going to try and do a combination of all that stuff. I might do a couple of variations to see which one works. I was thinking Daniel Craig, when he walks on, he always kind of has his gun and you can kind of see it swinging by his side, but I actually like the idea that the gun's kind of hidden, so I might try and hide it somewhere in a pocket or something and pull it out as a bit of a surprise. And I'm also trying to work out if I do kind of hand out like this, like they do, or whether I go for something like that, or maybe it's even a two-handed thing, which isn't very comfortable in this suit. And I also might do this unbuttoned, perhaps, so that when I do the spin, my jacket might come out a bit, it might look a bit more filmic, but it will show my stomach a little bit more, so we'll see.
Yeah, and action whenever ready. Very good. The squeaking shoes is funny. I would say that 7th one needs to be a bit more dramatic. Yeah, I think it's pretty subtle. It might be because by the time he's that far left, it might be this guy as well. I think you started on the wrong leg.
I also spoke to some of the team about what they think of the James Bond gun barrel sequence and what it meant to them in general.
James Bond gun barrel, the most iconic intro in cinema history.
It's that life has unexpected moments and you never know what to do, but with Bond you kind of get that feeling that even if something gets thrown at you, you have a plan somewhere, training kicks in or a skill kicks in. That to me, that's that gun barrel scene for me.
I mean, it's the classic trope now, isn't it? It's the kind of thing you think that every movie that's ever touched on James Bondy type things has ever done. And I did a bit of digging last night, thinking I could find this great big long list, and it turns out they haven't done it, but it's so synonymous, it just feels like it's everywhere.
I think that gun barrel intro is probably one of those crucial elements of a Bond film. For me, it's as important as the gun, the gadget, the girl, the drink. I think, yeah, it's iconic.
So I'm really happy with that. I think we've got our shot. Now I'm going to go back to the edit suite. I'm going to create a 3D gun barrel and I'm going to overlay it, and we're going to get this thing looking like a real James Bond gun barrel. We had an absolutely brilliant day at the shoot. Obviously for me this was fantastic, dressing up as Bond, doing the gun barrel thing. It was great, but I think everybody else enjoyed it. It's just great to be part of this kind of creative, collaborative network of people when you're a filmmaker, and you just meet loads of really cool people that have kind of similar interests and passions and so on. And I think everybody had a genuinely really good day. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll work together on something like this again soon. The next step was back in the office. I'm going to take the footage into After Effects, which is the motion graphics software which I use professionally, and it was just a case of recreating that gun barrel. Now, there are lots of different ways you could do it. For this channel, I actually, you'll notice in the introduction bit, I made my own gun barrel thing in Cinema 4D, which is 3D software. I basically took a cylinder, I extruded it, I put kind of score marks down the middle, I give it a twist so that it does look like a gun barrel, like, you know, what you think in the classic logo. And then I did some animated tracking on that as well, just to give it a bit of 3D-ness. But actually, when I was re-watching the Bond films for the channel and I was doing a bit of research into the gun barrel sequences, I noticed that most of them are flat kind of 2D graphics that are brought on as opposed to being kind of 3D tubes. The Pierce Brosnan ones did go a little bit 3D. That was mainly within the elements that are moving around on the inside of the gun barrel itself. So you have a kind of a whip as the texture moves across, which looks really, really cool. And then the Daniel Craig ones did go a lot 3D. I think Daniel Craig's possibly best, although it's a bit yellow, his best gun barrel is Spectre. And I rewatched that and I noticed that it is just a flat graphic that moves on, a very flat graphic with a little bit of 3D-ness going to it. And I thought, actually, for mine, I do want to homage the kind of the classic Bonds. I do want to keep it so that it's not kind of 3D accurate as it would be if you looked through a real gun barrel. I wanted to keep it so that it was reflecting that kind of flat element. So what I did was I took a shot from my gun barrel, which I created for the opening to this channel. I scaled it up so it was big enough for me to be able to manipulate it within the composition. And then it was just a case of tracking that onto the center. So just tracking my walk and making sure that it was matching the pace and the time. And I used one of Pierce Brosnan's, I think it was GoldenEye, just as a reference so that I made sure I had the correct timings and so on. But I did just recreate everything myself. Once I'd used that flat graphic from my logo, I tracked that on, and then I thought I actually want to reflect a bit of Brosnan's kind of 3D-ness in it. So I managed to get the texture of the original James Bond gun barrel, and I just thought, all right, I'm just going to copy this. So what I did was I created a white background and then drew on in Photoshop all the different black elements to give me the kind of the different imperfections inside the lens and these different kind of iconic reflections that we all kind of know now. But also it meant that this wasn't going to be exactly like Brosnan, or it wasn't going to be exactly like Connery. This is unique to this gun barrel. I then made it track on with the gun barrel, so it tracked from screen right to the center. And I applied something which is a bit of a cheat, but it's called a bulge effect, which basically just warps the images at the edges. And by tracking the bulge effect as well, it meant that the texture moved around almost like it was an actual reflection, but it's not exactly correct. It's not exactly how it would look in real life. And I think that's the kind of look I was going for. It's a very stylized look at the kind of the inside of the gun barrel, and it resolves, I think, pretty closely to that original gun barrel look. And yeah, so then once I'd done all that, it was a case of doing the blood. So I had to just basically make a red square, sit it over the top of the footage. You can change the opacity so that it affects the image underneath differently. So I set this to multiply, which means basically it'll retain the darkness underneath it, and anything that's brighter than dark is going to be tinted red. I put a simple track matte on it, which is where you tell it, I want these edges to be revealed and I want everything outside of those edges not to be. And then I just animated those down the screen. So as the square moved down the screen, essentially the different points on the matte moved a little bit, and I made them move a little bit different speeds to each other so that it did get a kind of a blood dripping effect going. Once I'd done that, it was just a little bit of a wiggle to the position as the guy who was about to shoot Bond slowly passes out, I guess. And then it was just a case of putting the very end sequence on, which is where the circle goes down to the bottom corner, and I put a little matte on it so that I could come through to the footage underneath, which is usually kind of MI6 or it's a beautiful location somewhere. I don't have those yet. I'm working on it. And then the very, very final thing to do was to just recreate the iconic dot moving across the screen. I'm not actually sure what this is supposed to represent. I think it's just, somebody hunting for Bond, perhaps. And it's literally just the position animated of a circle moving left to right. And every 10 frames, I think it was 11 frames, a white shadow remains on screen, and then that disappears, and then another one remains, and then that disappears. Very simple to do, very simple to create. Once I'd done this, I was really, really happy with how the gun barrel was looking. I was giddy, really. This is like kind of an ultimate fantasy of mine coming to life. I thought, right now, what I need to do is just slap the James Bond theme over it. However, I thought, actually, let's do this properly. I know composers, and I thought I'd reach out to a friend of mine, Gavin Solkeld, who I've worked with on a lot of films before. He's done soundtracks to a lot of my films, including my most recent film, Badger, a short horror film about a killer badger. Check it out. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to task this as though this is me making my own Bond film, my own Bond gun barrel. So I gave him a bit of a brief. I wanted it to be classic, but I also wanted to kind of retain that twangy Bond guitar, a little bit of electronic stuff going in there, and a little bit David Arnold mixed with a little bit of John Barry. And I just gave him a really loose brief, and then he just went with it, and he came up with something that I think is really, really good. It also means that I can use it on the channel also, which is great. I'm really, really happy about that. And I also asked him if he could just give me a little bit of information about his creative process and what he thought about the gun barrel. So let's hear from Gavin.
If you randomly select and compare any two gun barrel sequences from any of the Eon Bond films, no two are alike. They're all unique in terms of structure, tempo, instrumentation, length, and even melody. At least two of the gun barrels to date are entirely unique, these being the ones composed by Eric Serra for GoldenEye in 1995 and Michael Kamen for License to Kill in 1989. I've always loved John Barry's 007 scores, but I'm also a fan of Eric Serra's and Michael Kamen's takes on the formula. David Arnold, whose Bond scores I also admire greatly, added heavier percussion and electronic elements for his Die Another Day gun barrel in 2002, so the formula is not standard. With all of these inspirations in mind, I made 4 attempts at my own gun barrel introduction piece. Barry ended up liking a mix of versions 3 and 4, and so a 5th hybrid mix was made. As a James Bond fan growing up in the 1990s, there's a mixture of inspirations and homage in my own attempt at my gun barrel introduction. For example, GoldenEye inspired the opening orchestral stabs, with the underlying tom-toms further referencing Serra's work on that film. The gritty electric guitar melody is a throwback to the 1960s Connery films, which were scored by John Barry. He later opted to play the melody on strings for Roger Moore's films. The percussion loop beneath the guitar is an homage to David Arnold's work and was something I thought one might have heard in a 007 video game in the PlayStation 1 and 2 era. Finally, the closing moments round out with what I hope sounds like a John Barry type use of vibraphone, harp and string chords in order to bring the gun barrel aesthetic back to its 1960s roots. After all, John Barry was the maestro.
I just want to say thank you again to Gavin for putting the effort into this. It really is great. I was a little bit backwards and forwards with my feedback. I was getting quite specific the more I was hearing it as to how I wanted things, and he just absolutely nailed it despite all my feedback. So yeah, I was probably a bit of a nightmare client for him, but I really enjoyed the process, and I think he probably enjoyed it too. I would love to work on a Bond film with Gavin at some point in the future. So now I had the footage, I had the edit, and I had the music. The one last thing I needed to do, of course, was to add that important final element, the digital bullet. I'm joking, of course. I did not put a digital bullet on there. Let's have a look at the final gun barrel. I'm really, really happy with it. I'm hoping that YouTube lets me keep the music on it. If this is silent when you watch it, then you're just gonna have to imagine the Bond theme playing. But let's just see how it looks. You were expecting someone else? That was it. That was my gun barrel. What did you think? How closely did I get it to the original? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Have you ever shot something like this? I've seen people doing it with toilet rolls and a bit of jelly in front of it and so on. You know, you can get away with anything, and just being creative in filmmaking just gets you some really cool results. I'm really lucky that I know, you know, a really cool group of people that were really happy to help and support me throughout this episode of the YouTube video. And I've also made a really good contact at the studio as well, James, who was really, really helpful. You just get to be creative like this. I really, really enjoy it. This is what filmmaking's all about. And I just really, really enjoyed putting this episode together. It's definitely different to the stuff that I've done on the channel previously. So I'd just love to hear what you think. Were you happy with my gun barrel? Do you think it's good? Should I do anything differently? And do you like this sort of episode, or do you just want me to stick to my reviews? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if you did enjoy this, there are a lot more things like this planned. So please do subscribe. It massively, massively helps the channel. And it genuinely does give me a kick to keep on going, even when we're in the middle of a 35 degrees Celsius heat wave and I'm melting in my little office. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one, because James Bond will return.